Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly news update. I pray that it is a blessed day for you wherever you are, and I look forward to this update. There's a lot going on in the earth, and certainly grateful for every one of you that are out there. Thank you for the 5x5, and so glad you can all hear me. Those of you that come along and join us for these updates, and it's an important thing for us to do. We are all seeing a lot of things going on in the earth at the same time. Many of you are quite aware. Some of you may be over aware. That's one of the reasons why we do these once a week, as opposed to every day and every story, because whenever that happens, people tend to start checking out because it's just too much information and it can be overwhelming. And one of the things we like to say around here is we want to be informed without being overwhelmed. And so, very important that we keep a balance. Although we are commanded to watch, we are also required to find our fold, find our place, be faithful where he places us in the body as it pleases him. And we can't always be looking at these things while we're doing the thing he's called us to do. So once a week, we take a moment to look at all the things that are happening, see how it relates to Scripture, and take that point of view, if you will, and make sure we understand these things in accordance with His Word. And again, I want to thank all of you who are subscribed to the channel, and make sure that you are, because the platform does occasionally unsubscribe people, which I don't quite understand, but it does that. So please make sure that you are subscribed and like the video, and encourage our brothers and sisters in Mashiach to join us for these updates. I'm sure they'll be blessed. And for those, again, joining us for the first time, we do have a website that we use for all the stories that we are going to go over here. And so that's remnantwatch.com. That's remnantwatch.com. And so you're welcome to use that resource. Take a look at that, bookmark it. And here we'll have all the stories that we're going to be talking about and all the stories that we've covered in the past. So it's a great chronological review of other broadcasts and other discussions that we've had up to this point. And so good to see you all here on the chat. It's a blessing to connect with all of you. And I pray that wherever you are in the earth, you are holding fast that which you have, that no man take your crown. And on that note, let's get into the news. And our top story tonight, it's a doozy, folks. I actually had something else as our top story, and then this one came across as Russia is now scrambling nuclear-capable missiles to the border of NATO, basically, which is, basically all of Western Europe. And Russia scrambles nuclear-capable missiles to NATO border as World War III fears skyrocket. And so they're stoking this. This is getting to be a bit more of a crescendo. So we've been watching the slow stoke up of some of these narratives. And again, we watch these things from the 10,000-foot view. So we try to stay aware of them without letting them get to us. And Vladimir Putin's forces have the nuclear-capable Iskander-M missiles in their arsenal and are rapidly trying to mobilize them to a NATO border. Russia has reportedly mobilized nuclear-capable missiles to its border with NATO member Finland, as fears of Vladimir Putin escalating conflict in the region soar. Now, according to Russian media, a missile brigade has been formed near the new NATO member, equipped with Iskander-M ballistic missiles capable of firing conventional and nuclear warheads. So this is about to get dicey out in Eastern Europe. And I do believe that a lot of this is, again, meant to soak up a certain amount of fear. So again, we are those who watch these things. We know that they were coming. Mashiach warned us that there will be wars and rumors of wars. A lot of it more rumor than war, but nevertheless, rumors of wars. And the intention is to trouble, right? So this is why he countered that by saying, be not troubled. These things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. And he said, for nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. And of course, there's continuing going back and forth between Ukraine and Russia as they trade strikes. Take a look at this story that also is out in just this last few days. Ukraine and Russia trade strikes as U.S. gears up for a key vote. And that key vote was whether they were going to support Ukraine and provide billions of funds that were untrackable, untraceable, and unauditable. So how many smell a fish there, right? Ukraine and Russia both accused each other of deadly strikes on civilians Saturday as U.S. lawmakers prepare to vote on a $61 billion aid package Kiev hopes will boost its flagging war effort. Ukraine's biggest ally, Washington, has not approved large-scale support for the war-torn country, which it has since this report came out. And, of course, we now know that this is going to be unauditable. So, I keep seeing this meme, and it's a very interesting one. If they can just print money, what do they need taxes for? Just print more. So this becomes a really interesting exercise that you're watching as they continue to fund these things, as they continue to stoke this conflict. And I do believe that is part of a greater plan and perhaps trying to cover some of the things that are happening in the economic system to draw attention away from the inevitable collapse of the fiat money system, which we know by the scripture must come to pass. And this is when they want to bring in their control matrix. And so we're seeing various ways in which this control matrix is starting to be implemented and used to scare and intimidate people groups throughout the earth. So we're paying attention with great interest, but we're not ignorant of the devil's devices while we watch the news. So we keep that 10,000-foot view. This keeps us from being overwhelmed and being running around in fear and having that trepidation. We can stay very calm, exercise good wisdom, and do the things we're called to do. And I took note that this week we saw evidence that Iran was actually defended by much of the equipment and weaponry that was supplied by Russia. So both airstrikes, the ones going to Israel, remember we talked about that last week, and we're going, some of this looks like theatrics. And what we did find out is that there were a few strikes of the Iranian attack against Israel that landed on their target. So apparently what they did was they knew that the Iron Dome was going to respond. And so they shot up dummies, if you will, or decoys, while their actual targets were hit with using very precision guided missiles. And so there was damage on the ground. We did see that. And in Haifa, there was a refinery that was blown up. And there were other targets that were hit, including the city that they had named after Trump in the Golan Heights. So a lot of damage was had on the ground, and yet they didn't attack civilians. And so I think it was more of a measured response. It was almost as if Iran was letting them know, you will need to spend billions of dollars to defend against what we send over in millions of dollars worth of stuff. This is a war of attrition that I doubt very seriously the West can win. So it's a very interesting development as we watch these things unfold. And what we're seeing is, of course, some of the prophecies in Daniel are looking very interesting now. So for those of you that are Bible prophecy students, that's a good place to be looking and seeing if you can connect some of these dots. But the rockets are fired from Iraq toward the U.S. today. This was just yesterday. Let me put this on the screen. And so the region is heating up in multiple ways. 5 rockets fired from Iraq toward U.S. military base in Syria just occurred. At least 5 rockets were launched from Iraq's town of Zumar towards the U.S. military base in northeastern Syria on Sunday, and 2 Iraqi security forces and U.S. officials told Reuters. The attack against U.S. forces is the first since early February, when Iranian-backed groups in Iraq stopped their attacks against U.S. troops. So they're, again, putting this in the narrative, and whenever that's happening, we know that there's a reason for it. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that with great interest because, again, we know that a lot of this is manipulated. Those of you that have watched the movie Wag the Dog, I think is the name of it, you get to understand that, if you can just convince people enough that there's a conflict, then that has the same effect as the actual conflict. So I do believe that there's been some agenda that's been implemented that we will slowly start to figure out as more of the evidence comes in. Nevertheless, we have to watch and pray because that is what we are commanded to do. And of course, in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu did not heed the warnings of the world, of many, many leaders in both sides, really, that were saying, calm down. Remember that we saw the Biden administration was saying they wouldn't support certain elements and certain attacks and so forth. Netanyahu was under a tremendous amount of pressure internally in Israel itself to respond. And so, according to this report in the Telegraph, Netanyahu has done what the world warned him not to do. Okay, so they're going over a precipice, and there are many analysts that do not believe this will fare well. So all these bravados and hand clapping and saying, oh, the miracles, none of these got through, nonsense. They did exactly what they wanted to do. And I think that's why it took them a little bit before there was a response. It didn't happen automatically that same day. And it took a few days, and even that was a tepid response. If you look at the videos for Tehran, people were just walking around. So Israel's strike on Iran on Friday morning will not come as a surprise to Western observers, but it will cause great concern in Washington and London as the region tips closer toward an all-out war. Following Iran's attack on Israel on April 13th, itself a response to an Israeli strike, so again, tit for tat, on an Iranian consulate, Israel was clear a response would be required. That night, Joe Biden talked down Benjamin Netanyahu from launching an immediate response, warning him that America would not support or join in any offense against Iran. Not ready for that. The president reportedly told the Israeli leader to take the win from his stunningly effective air defenses, which of course they were touting was completely effective and knocked down all the missiles. Meanwhile, they're hiding the footage of the refinery. There's only 2 refineries in Israel. One of them was on fire. So they just cut in half their refinery capability to refine oil. And if you notice, there's probably not a lot of countries lining up to sell them oil. So this is about to change the dynamics on the ground for the Israeli people. And many of you have been paying attention to the news coming out of Israel. And of course, the protests against Netanyahu are skyrocketing. A tremendous amount of support for a early election cycle to basically remove him from power. And again, I think that's what a lot of them are afraid of, because as we've been kind of watching, and you guys are pretty sharp, so you're keeping an eye on this as well. They're changing their tactics. They're trying desperately to pin a lot or pin down the Israeli regime in a different kind of way than they have in the past. So, it's interesting that Iran did not hit residential or civilian areas. And that, I believe, is because they're attempting to take the high ground. This is something that Israel had been very, very good at for so long. And now, they're losing that high ground, especially because of social media. A lot of videos that are coming out, of course, showing the victimization of people groups. And again, we don't take sides in these things, but we do observe the narratives that are being spun. We observe the way in which the stories are being told, because there's a reason why they tell the stories the way they do. And so there's a plot afoot, if you will. And those of you that are aware of the Albert Pike prophecy that was put out in the 1800s, these 3 wars were foretold. So who's shocked that there's a war now erupting between Zionists and Islam? Who's shocked? Nobody. That was all predicted. We knew about that. We were sitting waiting for how are they going to start this war? So I think there's a lot of people that are aware of that, and that, of course, is a part of the factor here. And Israel hit Iran with some very special half-ton supersonic, what's called Rampage missiles. A report says so. This is kind of interesting. So they broke out some new weaponry. Israel's media reported that Israel used a Rampage missile on a strike on Iran. So it did respond on, again, Yom Shishi, Friday morning. And the supersonic missiles are designed to strike ground targets such as military bases. However, officials and independent analysis are giving a range of other possibilities. And so, I saw the response. I saw some of the analysis of the response. Some of you may have watched some of the military, a review of these things and just what was reported. And And what we're seeing from the analysts like Scott Ritter, for example, if you guys are familiar with him, and he's been out on the news circuit really giving his analysis, and it's not looking good. As a matter of fact, the Iranians feel pretty confident that they can overwhelm Israel if they needed to. And so this is starting to get dicey. And I do believe that we are seeing this happen in this time period, in this window, for a reason. Okay, for a reason. And so just this last week, during this last week cycle, so again, since our last report, the UN Security Council is about to vote on a Palestinian state. And again, not really listening to Israel's objections like they used to in the past. So this is really changing this up. And why are they being so quiet about this is a really good question. On Friday, the UN Security Council will take a vote, which will determine whether or not the state of Palestine will be granted full UN membership. Okay. So we're continuing to watch the news to see what they announce in terms of this, because this is monumental if they start to recognize a Palestinian state. And I do believe, based on this, they are a lot closer. I have to agree with Scott Ritter's analysis that they're closer to that result than they were before October 7th. So this entire war against Hamas, if you will, and this entire conflagration has not been good in the media, and has not been good for the reputation of Israel. They had up to this point enjoyed the reputation of one of the most ethical armies and so forth, and they've really lost that based on a lot of the footage and the actions that were taken, again, by different people within that. So again, we don't take sides, but it is interesting as this is developing. And our push in prayer is for peace, and for peace to reign, because after all, we know that there's a prophecy about everybody. We're getting sick and tired of war. Well, none of us can figure out what solutions bombs bring. What does it solve when you bomb something? But nevertheless, they continue this method of diplomacy. And of course, that backfired in the Gulf. You're not hearing anything since the Russian warship went into the Gulf, and the Houthis basically took over the Gulf region. So you're not seeing any news coming out of that. And it's really interesting how that went nice and quiet. Okay. And of course, you do see that they're not hiding. Russia's not hiding their support for Iran. Deals are being made. And is it a dangerous partnership? Some people are trying to paint it that way. Certainly in the West, they are. Certainly from the Jerusalem Post, they're going to paint it as an ominous sign, right? Intelligence sources say that Tehran's growing partnership with Moscow has led to secret weapons deals. And they're not sure what those secret weapons are. And that is, of course, causing some consternation. Numerous intelligence sources say that Tehran's growing partnership with Moscow strengthens the capabilities of both countries. And we do know that the Russians actually got some missile technology from the Iranians. So Iranians are actually making their own missile technologies. This is very interesting developments as it goes out. And essentially, this again is these prophecies, if you will, are enemy prophecies that they're trying to make come to pass. Last March, a Russian arms manufacturer invited an Iranian delegation for a shopping tour of its arms factories. The 17 visitors were treated to lunches and cultural shows, and on the last day, they toured a factory that produces coveted military products in Tehran, advanced Russian air defense systems for shooting down enemy planes. And so anti-aircraft missile technology, which has come a long way, is now being employed, of course, in both countries. So it's not just Israel that has an Iron Dome. Other countries have other anti-aircraft and anti-missile technology as well. And so this is getting dicey as they get, of course, very brave. And I remember seeing a report last week that the Iranian military was daring Israel to make a counterattack. So now we're going to see the counter of the counter. So we saw the attack on the consulate, and then of course we saw the Iranian attack, which blew up a couple of things. It blew up a refinery, and it blew up, I believe, an airfield and a military base and a town that did have some damage. And then of course you see the Israeli response. So what do you think comes next? I mean, you guys can predict this. I mean, this is just chess here. You move, now it's your move, and it's my move, and it's your move, and it's my move, and it's your move. We're just watching a game of chess here, all right? And so here, right on cue, I mean, who's going to be shocked by this headline? Mass destruction. Iran vows to strike with weapon. Look at this, guys. Never used before. So again, now they're going to go down to their secret stash and start pulling out things you've never seen before. As Israel pledges they won't get off scot-free after a missile blitz. So Iran has vowed to unleash a weapon never used before against Israel if the country retaliates for Tehran's missile and drone blitz. Israel told Iran today they won't get off scot-free for the attacks. No, wait a second. Now, Israel's the one that attacked the consulate and blew up an Iranian commander. So it's interesting that, but if you blow them up, right? If you do something, this is why wars and bombs don't solve anything. Look at this. This is like kids in the schoolyard. So now they're, well, we're going to get you. Well, you're not going to get away with that. We'll get you. Oh, you're not going to get away with that. We'll get you. And it's going to be just going back and forth. I mean, this is nonsense. The moment Iran began its drone and missile attack on Israel was broadcast on Iranian TV. And Israel and its allies, according to this report, 99% of the projectiles were shot down, which in and of itself, as we talked about, would produce debris. But of course, there were some that got through. And that is what's interesting and concerning the military analysts, because they're looking at what actually occurred, not what the news reports say and what the bravado say and all of that. What they're looking at is the reality on the ground. What blows up? What gets destroyed? Was it intentional? Did they actually outsmart the dome system? And are they now looking at a scenario where if they are bombarded at a much higher rate, because that's far from what Iran did not send their maximum capability, of course. So, and again, if that's coordinated with other countries, this could get dicey quick. And I'm reminded of the prophecy in 2015 that was going through the synagogues when I was in Israel in 2015 and 2016, when Remnant House began there on the Sea of Galilee. There was a prophecy of a young man who had had a near-death experience, and he was talking about basically what would happen if Israel got into a war, and it was not a pretty picture. So this is interesting to see. And are they doing it on purpose? That's the question that I keep asking, is are they intentionally trying to create this conflict that will cost a lot of lives? And so we're going to stay tuned and continue to watch this. And again, pray for both sides. There's innocent victims everywhere. And certainly the people in Israel seem to be the most victimized out of any group that is out there. I think they're slowly waking up to the reality of what, just like we're waking up to some of the things being done to us by quote unquote government, right? I think they're waking up the same way, going, wait a second. And so I think that this is what's creating a lot of pushback, and awakening is predicted by the scripture. So here we go, folks. We're going to continue to see that happening. And speaking of which, one of the things that we knew, multidimensional warfare, again, folks, when they start using economic warfare, and I do think this is the real war that's going on. Look what's happening here. BRICS is developing a unified financial system for dollarless trade. Okay, this just came out yesterday, and the BRICS Economic Alliance is currently developing a unified financial system in 2024 for dollarless trade within the bloc. And that bloc is growing. There's more and more countries are joining BRICS and becoming part of this anti-dollar coalition. And so again, this is continuing to become a multi-dimensional conflict. And this is going to affect us at the grocery store, importing things. A lot of things in the West are imported. A lot of raw materials have to come from these countries. And so this is not something that we can take lightly. Throughout the first 4 months of the year, the bloc has continually embraced digital asset adoption. So this is going to speed them along to be able to implement a solution. We're going to see here in a moment. Subsequently, that has proven to be a crucial part of its attempts to circumvent U.S. dollar necessity in unilateral transactions. With the implementation of a unified system for payments, that process would grow even more so. And one of the things that I'm keeping an eye on personally, just my opinion, but if they offer in BRICS, okay, or using a BRICS account, the ability for individuals or small businesses or commercial accounts whether individual accounts or commercial accounts, if they make an offering that suddenly makes that available to the sort of average person, I don't think you have to wait for governments to abandon the system. The citizens will. And so there's a huge number that would probably move over to that type of an asset as opposed to a fiat currency. And I think they know that. So I believe we're about to see the collapse of some things. And I think that's why you're seeing some of the conflict that you're seeing today. And in fact, they're not even bashful about this. BRICS is to replace the US dollar with a cryptocurrency for trade. So this was a previous report, according to recent statements from the chairman of the Russian State Duma Committee on the Financial Market, Anatoly Asakov. The BRICS bloc is working to replace the U.S. dollar with a cryptocurrency for trade. And of course, El Salvador, they use Bitcoin. And indeed, Asakov discussed the alliance's work to utilize digital assets in place of fiat currency for international transactions. And do I think one is necessarily better than the other? No. Folks, it doesn't really matter what form the mammon takes. Mammon is still mammon. It's still operating under the same deity of Babylon. So it doesn't really matter. But it is interesting to see what the effects would be. The effects in the West would be essentially a jubilee, because once they kill the Federal Reserve dollar, for lack of a better word, because really that's what it is, all debts are in that dollar. So that's going to cause basically a massive restructuring. And Russia and China, I think, are preparing for that. I think they see, the end that the guy on the street's not really wanting to look at, but I think they can see it coming. And so they're preparing for completely disconnecting so that when it occurs, they're not affected. Can you see this? It's very intelligent when you think about it. If you go, well, if they know it's going to collapse because they're the ones holding big amounts of it and they're selling them off, they know it's going to cause a collapse because they're essentially creating that by not buying them anymore and by no longer using them, right? So what's that going to do? You know as well as I do, that's going to cause a collapse of that currency. If they know that and they can essentially predict it, well, then this suddenly makes sense that Russia and China are completely ditching the US dollar for trade. Okay, this makes sense then. And this is why I believe you're going to continue to see some of the warfare that you're seeing, because this is what it really is about. It's really about, what's the root of all evil, everyone? The love of mammon. Okay, it's power and control. The ability to exercise power without love. That's what mammon gives you. Okay, this is why we as believers have to cut the head of this snake off and honor Yahuwah. In what is certainly an important moment for the BRICS alliance, Russia and China have completely ditched the US dollar for trade. Kaboom. That's a huge piece of news. Indeed, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has recently stated that the economic bilateral relations between the two countries have undergone near complete de-dollarization. They're losing all need for the dollar. The abandonment of the greenback in these trade dealings has been a continued goal for the economic alliance. Now, more than 90% of the nation's bilateral trade dealings are settled in either the yuan or the ruble. Subsequently, the two countries are now set to continue those efforts that have heeded monumental results. So what are we seeing here, folks? We're seeing the actual and practical de-dollarization effort. And this is something we knew was coming, and we've been watching this for, you guys are all sharp. So you're paying attention to this stuff, and you knew that this was happening. But what we don't really understand is how this will affect the man on the ground. And anytime there's a transition, there's going to be pain. And who's going to feel it? Well, I saw a recent report revealing that, the average person in the earth is making $2 a day. That's something that, is not your fate, perhaps, as you're watching this broadcast, but for many, many residents of Earth, they are literally on the precipice of total starvation, poverty at levels that we can't even fathom or imagine. So while it may be inconvenient for some people, it is literally devastating. Every half a point, every little bit of movement. If the cost of grain goes up, if the cost of food goes up, the cost of housing goes up, this is becoming devastating. And they have all but destroyed the inner cities. The major inner cities are becoming essentially no-go zones. And the crime rate, not only the crime rate, but the quality of life is degrading quickly in these different places. So again, are we surprised? No, these were things prophesied. These are things right in the scripture. He warned about it, and he said that he would discomfort his people. And sure enough, we're seeing that right now. So this is the time for you to be praying and seeking him as to where perhaps you belong, because staying in the status quo, thinking everything's going to be fine, is looking less and less wise in this hour. And as a matter of fact, we're seeing the ripple effect right here, on the ground. U.S. Bank closes 10 branches. This is why we don't use these ads, because they're very annoying. U.S. Bank closes 10 branches in a single week, while Bank of America shuts 3. And so we've been watching this slowly happen. And they didn't want to do them all at once because they don't want to cause a bank run. So they keep consistently doing that. And the closures add to the hundreds of branches with a shutdown this year. See how they slowly are doing that? You may not have even known there were hundreds of branches that were closed. Those of you that watch our broadcast knew, but the vast majority of people didn't know that. U.S. Bank filed to close 10 branches in a single week, while Bank of America will shutter 3, official data shows. The closures add to the hundreds of branches which have shut down this year amid concerns Americans are being left without access to basic financial services. You think? Okay, and this is, again, intentional, so that they can create an economic situation which forces you to go through the door they want you to go through. And by attacking various elements of your norm, your life, right, then this is going to continue to create pressure for the average person. Again, trying to be by yourself during these times is going to be a lot harder. It's going to make it a lot more difficult to function in this earth. And so, again, this is one of the dimensions of warfare that we're watching. Economic warfare is not a joke. Economic warfare is really, economics are the critical element of warfare. As a matter of fact, we just saw again this bill passed that gave billions of dollars to Ukraine and Israel. Why would they need that? Because they're going to have to resupply just to keep up the fight, much less win it. So if you don't think financially that it's really a financial war, you're mistaken. So now BRICS is being strengthened by countries that are de-dollarizing, who have no love for that dollar, have no love for the hegemony that has ruled for all this time. They're ready for the next season, if you will, and they're betting on it. That is huge. That is ginormous for the upcoming season. So it is wise for us to pay attention to these things. And speaking of multidimensional warfare, again, a different layer of warfare. So Mashiach knew all this, and he warned us about this. He said there'd be wars, rumors of wars. There will be pestilence, earthquake, famine, all kinds of things. And this is all not natural. Some of this is contrived or generated by man. Look at this article talking about playing God with the atmosphere. Now, we knew this, but this is now coming out in the open where they can't hide it anymore. It's now becoming pretty obvious. We were watching one of the states in the United States having open debate about aerosol injection and changing the atmosphere and all that. So interfering with Earth's climate is becoming more possible and less predictable than ever. Okay, this is from Dubai. You're seeing the results of the deluge there, a deluge of record-breaking rainfall this week. The citizens of the United Arab Emirates and Oman are still trying to return to regular life. The storms forced schools, offices, and businesses to close, and they're getting better and better at this. And so, and they announced this stuff, so they're not hiding that they're doing that. The downpour seemed almost apocalyptic. On Tuesday, the UAE received the amount of rain that usually falls in an entire year. And so this weather warfare is continuing. And I believe, and you guys are all pretty sharp, so I'm sure you're thinking some of the same thoughts, that they have more than just weapons that affect weather. There's other types of ways in which, things can be affected. And this thing in Dubai was no joke. Anybody that's been paying attention to the pictures that are coming out, it's flooding everything. And this is mega destructive to the economy of any country. Dubai floods act as a stark warning of the unintended consequences we can unleash when we use such technology to alter the weather. So they're coming right out and talking about this now. Additionally, we have little control over the aftermath of cloud seeding, where exactly it is going to be raining effectively. Using techniques such as cloud seeding to bring much needed rainfall in one area can cause flash floods and droughts in another. So if you take note of that side effect, you can then manipulate it. And if you don't think that's being manipulated, well, I would say that you're being a little naive, because I believe it's definitely being manipulated. Another technology that we were warned about, Mashiach told us that there would be earthquakes in diverse places. So he told us this so we would be prepared. And again, when we see these things, we would know that our redemption draws nigh and that we are coming to the end of the age. And so this just happened. This was literally just coming in. A 6.3 magnitude earthquake hits Taiwan. The quake shook buildings in the capital, Taipei. And of course, you know that Taiwan is an area of great interest and attention. So is it coincidental that there was an earthquake there? More than 80 earthquakes. The strongest was a 6.3. Sorry about that. Struck Taiwan's east coast starting Monday night and into the early hours of Tuesday, and some causing shaking of buildings in the capital, Taipei, the island's weather administration said. How annoying. I don't know what they think. Did they think that's actually going to work? Oh, quickly, let's go to Temu and go shopping. I'm reading an article. This is so ridiculous. I noticed that it's the dated April 23rd, which is tomorrow, because they're over the international date line. So it's already tomorrow over there, just so you know. So this is pretty fresh. This just occurred. And I think we're going to continue to see more earthquakes, because that's what Messiah warned us would occur until the great earthquake. And the great earthquake will split all the way to the sea. And this is when its feet land on the Mount of Olives. I believe that's the last big sign that we're going to see as the coming of the King. And China also, what a shock. Who's shocked that China had some adverse weather? Who's surprised? Anybody surprised that China came under weather attack? They're admitting that they're playing God with the weather, right? So who's shocked at this? Well, now they're talking about, and by the way, do we remember in this last year how many different times we saw the words like once in 100 years? Come on, guys. You know how many times we saw this where they were saying once in 100 years, or, you know, the once a century flood. We saw this like so many times in the last year where there were floods everywhere, and including China. If you remember, we showed footage of China people getting swept away and all kinds of stuff. And here we go again. Landslides injure 6 as southern China braces for, once again, a once in a century flood. Apparently it's once a year now. I don't know about the once a century thing. Okay, maybe they're just making up for centuries they didn't have it, and they're picking them up every year, because this keeps happening. Landslides in southern China injured at least 6 people and trapped others, state media reported on Sunday, as the region braced for severe floods seen around once a century. Torrential downpours across swaths of Guangdong province since Thursday have swollen rivers in the Pearl River Delta and triggered deluges in mountainous areas. And of course, this is again producing devastating effect on these countries. So you're going to sell off the dollar and bad things start happening. Isn't that kind of interesting? Don't y'all find that a little interesting? I do. Who's a little suspicious? Things to make you go, right? Things that make you wonder, okay? And now look what they're bringing to bear. They're bringing this technology. And this is again another story that will not surprise you, but here we go, folks. They're using the AI, the thing that we've been talking about so much, and now the Hurry AI Kane. Google AI is predicting rare extreme weather events and a week in advance. So they're letting you know before it occurs. Gosh, isn't that convenient? Build their confidence in AI. You know, come on, let's count on AI, and could save people from hazardous catastrophes. This is going to be your new deity, right? You're going to worship this stuff. The AI models is dubbed SEEDS, Scalable Ensemble Envelope Diffusion Sampler, whatever. SEEDS works similar to popular large language models like ChatGPT and Midjourney. It leverages the power of AI to generate vast number of weather forecasts in a short amount of time. So who's shocked that they're going to use AI to predict the weather? How many think they might be using AI to create the weather? Okay. How about I create the pattern and then I tell you before we do it, hey, guess what? This is going to happen over here because that's what we're going to do. We're going to cloud seed to make it happen. But then you all will believe in the AI. The AI. As if we've not seen the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies and all the other predictive programming where they basically told everybody that these things would be coming. And so again, the amount of damage that has come as a result of what I believe is a lot of weather manipulation is just amazing. Storm dumps heaviest rain ever recorded in the desert nation of UAE, as we were just talking about. And again, this has just been, I mean, this is absolutely devastating what they've had to go through. So folks, this is something that we need to be aware of. This is why high ground is important. We've got to have high ground. We've got to understand the importance of being in a place that Elohim has set apart. And in fact, they were already warning. Some of you caught this in the narrative, and if you didn't, well, sit back. I'll show it to you. They're letting you know in advance. They're telling you, okay? They are telling you, get ready for one of the busiest Atlantic hurricane seasons on record. Now, that's an awfully confident boast, don't you think? That they're making in the spring. Yes, the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. So if you're on the East Coast, do you think you should take that seriously? I do. Atlantic hurricane season is likely to be destructive and costly and has the potential to be one of the busiest on record. So how many want to guess that there's likely to be some storms coming up the East Coast? That's the consensus of at least 4 major forecasting services, all of whom point to the conditions in the tropical Pacific and in the Atlantic hurricane formation zone that are ripe. They're just ripe. They're so ripe, okay, for a tropical storm harvest. Yeah, especially if you're playing God with the atmosphere, okay, especially if you're doing things like cloud seeding and directing these things. So again, it makes you stop and go, what is going on here? Okay. And so just understand that we're seeing this now being used. I believe weather's being weaponized because it puts the population once again in a scattered state, once again in a fearful state. And that's when they're easiest to manipulate. Okay. And so this is something that I believe is going to continue to be part of our world until the king puts a complete end to it once and for all. And for those of you that might have been sleeping last week and didn't catch this, this came in right during the same, we did our broadcast last week on the 15th, and this came out on the 15th. So we didn't quite catch it on the previous broadcast. So I want to point it out to you tonight. A terrifying, and this is their own description, okay? Terrifying FISA bill set to include vast new surveillance powers, forcing businesses to become NSA spies. So the new atmosphere that is now being generated, the Senate is set to vote on the FISA reauthorization bill, which it did, to include a provision forcing any company or individual that provides any communication service to become a pawn of the National Security Agency's surveillance grid. The Section 702 provision of the FISA renewable bill requires any company that hosts any form of communication service to surrender surveillance data to the NSA under a gag order if compelled by the agency. So this is going to include all of your platforms and any platform where communication is included. And so this is a very, very ominous sign, and they have to do it under a gag order. Isn't that fascinating, right? So they have to do it under a gag order. They can't even reveal that they're being compelled to produce this information. Can somebody say Big Brother, right? So is this ominous? I believe so. I believe that this is an undermining of your rights against search and seizure. I think this is a end around search and seizure. And I'm sure lawyers will be looking at this, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of litigation, a lot of, pushback. But, what they normalize is normalized. What they make, what they can justify, they can do it. And the reason why is because they're building their own coalitions and, again, attempting to control populations. And see here we A different mechanism of warfare would be using pandemics. We've already seen that used to great effect. So Biden administration announces a new partnership with 50 countries to stifle future pandemics. So they're saying they're going to stifle the pandemics, and who's a little suspicious of that? I am. President Joe Biden's administration is launching a program that will help 50 countries identify and respond to infectious diseases because they love you so much, because they're so concerned about your well-being, right? And U.S. government officials will offer support in the countries, most of them located in Africa and Asia, to develop better testing, surveillance, communication, and preparedness for such outbreaks in those countries. Because again, they're so concerned about your welfare. And again, none of us are really buying that, but what do we do about this? This is starting to become more and more aggressive as we go. So this multidimensional war against the people and the psychology of the people, these are things dropped into the narrative to make us think this is normal, this is okay. This is far from normal. It's one thing to offer solutions, and if you want them, you can come get them. It's another thing to basically slowly put a dragnet around the people where you've got communication infiltration and you've got cooperations between countries to deal with pandemics, which, of course, as you all found out, can cross right into your personal life in a really aggressive way. Okay, speaking of crossing into your personal life really aggressively, nothing does that like food. And the avian flu thing that they're trying to really keep in the news, and they don't want to stop this, they continue to drop this narrative over and over and over again. 1 minute they're telling you it's no big deal, you don't need to worry about it. Next thing you know, you're seeing more articles about it. Avian flu virus detected in raw milk from infected dairy cows. Remember, we saw this slowly starting to be told. Now it's becoming normal. Okay, for them, they're normalizing this. They're continuing to drop it piece by piece. Why? Because little by little, the people become convinced that this is even possible. I think this is crazy, but this is what they're pitching. Okay, are we in danger of spreading to? Of it spreading to our food supply? It was 3 months ago when we wrote about the surge of H5N1 bird flu strain that had been then already killed tens of millions of birds in various parts of the U.S. and land and marine animals in other countries. So we're just telling you this is really serious stuff. Surprising experts, the flu jumped to cows and goats. The goats are providing you milk and cows are providing you milk. And my goodness, we just can't have that. And now it has been detected very high concentrations in raw milk from infected animals, the World Health Organization announced last week. Anybody feel real high confidence in that? Where'd that come from? The WHO. I don't think I need to tell you all why I would be suspicious of that report. Okay, I think you are all sharp enough without me having to spell it out why I think this is some dangerous stuff. And in the meantime, while they're doing that, they're putting the cooties on hunting, which we already saw them drop other stories to this effect. Here comes another one, right? So yeah, I'm with you, Alan. I'm not exactly buying this, but this is what they keep putting into the narrative, so we got to cover it. 2 hunters become the first Americans to die from zombie deer disease after eating infected venison. So what is this meant to do? Well, you can guess it. It's meant to get you off of hunted game. Okay. A study suggested 2 men in Wyoming died from chronic wasting disease. There have been no confirmed cases in humans, as CWD mainly affects deer. Okay. Who knows who these 2 people are and what they actually died of? Who knows? They can say anything they want. But nevertheless, this is now putting the stink on hunting. So can you see the food control slowly coming in? 2 hunters may have become the first Americans to die from zombie deer disease. Experts have been warning for years that nearly 100% fatal chronic wasting disease, which leaves deer confused, drooling, and unafraid of humans, could jump from animals to people. We've been warning about this. We've been warning for a long time. We've been trying to tell you all, stop eating game. Stop going hunting. Don't eat deer meat. Why? Because deer meat could supplement your income or supplement your grocery bill, right? Stop supplying your own food. Don't go out there and actually eat deer. My goodness, that could be dangerous. That could be terrible. Meanwhile, there's millions of deer that people harvest every year. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I used to live in Minnesota, where deer hunting is, there's summer and then there's deer hunting. That's the way the seasons work. So what summer follows summer, or what season follows summer? Deer hunting. It's literally that level. And so you're going to need a lot more than 2 to convince a bunch of Minnesotans of that. But nevertheless, do you see the narrative seeding? This is what I want you to notice. From the 10,000-foot view, you're watching the slow implementation. And I mean, then you add Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, North, South Carolina. I mean, there's all kinds of parts of the country just in the U.S. where this is second nature for them to go hunting. So good luck with that. Telling all those hunters that they're not going to be hunting deer anymore. I mean, just you're going to need a lot more than 2. Just saying. Okay. And while they're doing that, and it is interesting. That's a good point, Alan, that they're targeting clean animals. So that's a very good observation. It's very interesting, and animals that they cannot inject and that will live. Because remember, when they tried to inject the beef cows all died. Whereas when they injected pork, the pork just kept on going because it's full of parasites anyway. And it's unclean, so we don't eat that. And so what are they coming for? Who are they coming for? Who's the war really against? Pay attention, folks. And now they're going to make it so that, only one person can use a particular gun. And this is something we saw in the movies, right? We saw this coming, but here it is. It's reality. Smart Gun will put fingerprint, facial recognition technology to work, right? So Biofire has called its first and only biometric firearm in the market. So this gives them an alternative. And I see this as another end around for your rights, because now they'll say, okay, we can't stop you from owning a gun, so you're going to have to own one of these kind. The Smart Gun, developed by Biofire, will soon start shipping to customers that pre-ordered the firearm. The Biofire Smart Gun features built-in fingerprint and infrared facial recognition technology that only permits use by, look at this, guys, authorized individuals according to the company. So now they're going to have a remote control of the trigger. Remote control of the trigger. Biofire has called its first and only biometric firearm in the market. How many want to bet that law enforcement will be able to deactivate all of these? Right? So one of the reasons why you have the amendments you do is in the event of a tyrannical government. And look what's slowly coming in. So this is very clever. I think it's a very interesting story. You'll find it on Remnant Watch. So I think it's something that's definitely worthy of review. And I do think it is early in the process. So we're just seeing this. So we'll keep an eye on it as we track through time. But pay attention, because little by little, they're coming for certain things. And one of the things that we've been watching manifest in our world is increased demonic activity. So a lot of the things that you're watching at even the highest levels of government are being controlled by demons. These are people that are not following Elohim. These are people that do not repent of their sin. They are literally walk-ins. So many of the policies, laws, systems, ideas were all demonically inspired. They're being controlled by and ruled by spirits. These are people that party all night and then come in the morning, put on a suit, and tell you what you got to do to live your life. These are people that are open sieves for demonic activity, and they're trying to tell you how to live your life every day. And so this is very dangerous, and we are in a very, very difficult time period, as we knew was going to manifest. And this story here really exemplifies the level of demonic activity that is going on. And this was right in middle school. Horror moments. A middle school student drags fellow pupil. So this is middle school. This is my son's age, okay? Into the ground and repeatedly bangs her head on the floor in front of a crowd who are barking and cheering in yet another brutal fight in school premises. So your gentle, sweet, cute, beautiful child is now being subjected to demonized evil. This story is horrible, and if you do want to watch the video, you can. It is available on the site, so you can watch it. But this poor child was absolutely brutalized. And if you remember, there was one case a few weeks back where we talked about, and the young lady was kicked while down, kicked in the head, was in a coma. She was beaten to within an inch of her life, and now doesn't even remember. Lost a lot of her memory. I mean, she's going to be recovering for a long time, all because somebody sent them to a school. Right? So again, we're reaching that point where you got to start asking these questions. Is it worth it? Should your child be in that scenario? Is that wisdom? Or are you all starting to see that this is going in a certain direction? The trajectory continues. And what I look at, and if you just take a look at this picture here, what I look at is, you can easily say, oh, the person doing the victimization is demonized. What about this kid? He's not jumping in. What about this kid? Not jumping in, not standing, just standing there. All this poor child is being victimized. Nobody's interfering. Okay, nobody's coming to defense of this poor child. And so this is definitely something that is on the increase. I think that it's a very dangerous sign when they're victimizing the innocent children openly, blatantly, and videotaping it and laughing. And if you go on BitChute, you'll see nothing but this constant stuff. This is just one sampling of it. If you go on to some of these, BitChute is one of them. People are recording events rather than interfering. They're recording a beatdown rather than saying, hey, stop. They're recording an abuse rather than interfering or calling the police. So, I don't know if everybody's just trying to go viral, or, they're looking for, some type of popularity out of it. I don't have any idea. It's illogical to me. But all of you should be enraged. I know my veteran brethren out there are probably thinking, you got to be kidding me. And if you remember, in response to one of these school shootings that we saw a few years ago, the veterans started policing schools in that district. And we didn't hear about any more school shootings in that district anymore, because that's not what they want. They want to continue to terrorize the people. And so this is all demonic. That is pure demonic. You may not see it as such because you may think, oh, it's just children. No, children would just have honest bully fights. Back when we were kids, two guys got in the back and they'd duke it out. And, that was different. We're talking about a child here that was basically defenseless and was severely beaten. So this is something that should warn you about the dangers of mingling your children with those who are not set apart. I would strongly encourage you against that, because that is a very dangerous thing to do. And we are to be set apart people for a reason. So you really have to be very careful. And again, like I said, a lot of this is being inspired by demons. And if you're not sure, well, here's one more story that perhaps will take you over the top. And again, all these available on Remnant Watch, so you can look at them for yourself in detail and get more details on them. But what would possess a person, and I use that word very clearly and intentionally, what would possess a woman to stab a 1-year-old, a complete stranger, just walking down the street right in front of the parents? Okay? You tell me what spirit that is. This female is accused of stabbing a 1-year-old in a stroller in front of her parents on a Philly street. What kind of psychotic evil has to be operating in their bodies for them to even think such a thought, much less do it? So this poor child, 1 year old, is stabbed by this person who was out on bail after they were grabbed up for stabbing someone in New York City. A female who's accused of stabbing a 1-year-old boy in a stroller in front of his parents in Philadelphia Street Saturday. So on a Saturday, on a Shabbat. How many times have I pointed out that these things happen? A lot of things happen on Shabbats, so it's interesting. As well as a 20-year-old woman on a different street hours earlier. So this is clearly demonic. This person is possessed. This person has a spirit that is self-destructing this poor child. And this person is a victim too, except now they're becoming a victimizer. And they were out on bail in connection with a 2022 stabbing in New York City. And Takira Haster, 28, was out on bail. She missed her Thursday hearing in an assault case for allegedly stabbing a 31-year-old man who tried to break up a fight between Hester and another woman. And so he got stabbed for his trouble and apparently made it down to Philadelphia just 2 days later, where officials say she engaged in 2 knife attacks. And now, a few hours later, the mother and father were walking with their twins using a stroller outside Temple Beth Zion, Beth Israel, when police said a woman rushed up and stabbed one of the children. Just rushed up and stabbed a child in a stroller. If I sound outraged, it's because I am. And I think we all need to be a little bit outraged by this demonic activity. But we know that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and rulers of darkness. And that this is what it is. It is a spiritual war. It is a spiritual battle. It is a spiritual and evil demonic time. And this is why it is more important than ever to be sober and vigilant, to be aware of where you are and why you're there. And so these are people, and again, I can't even tell you how many reports I've seen over the last year. Do a run a search for yourself. How many events have happened on a Sabbath day when you should be in your dwelling, when you should be resting? And that seems to be a heightened time for attacks. And so let me encourage every one of you to be sober and vigilant in this hour, to not take lightly these things that are going on in the earth. This is getting dicey, and I believe now we're going into the summertime when kids get out of school and there's more activity and there's more people milling about and doing different things, and summer tends to bring out more and more people into the public. So we should expect to see more reports and more things that make us realize and help us to see that we have reached we've crossed the door. We crossed into a different time, and the demonic, the evil, the poltergeist activity, all of this is going to continue until the King returns. So those of you who are out there that are wise, this is the time to, again, find your fold, find the place you belong, be found faithful. Don't cut corners. Don't play games with the things that are kadosh, that are holy, that Elohim is calling for. Obey him. He is trying to preserve you from all of that. Well, that's our report for tonight. I pray this has been a blessing to you. May Elohim bless each and every one of you. Good night.